Welcome to another Britflicks.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's guest is film producer Neil Jones. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Now, just to give people a little sense of who you are, you've worked on many films, and I'm not going to try and list them all, but a few have already featured on the podcast. So, The Seasoning House, Eaten by Lions, The Banishing, as well as Britflicks, the website, and the podcast, so the website, which does featurettes and stuff, Bonded by Blood 2, We Still Kill the Old Way, We Still Steal the Old Way, and more recently, Malachi Smith's The Score, Sky Original Last Train to Christmas, and the recent UK Netflix #1, Bank of Dave. Welcome, Neil.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Is there anything obvious that I should have said about what you've been involved with that you want to...
No, I think that covered it quite well. My involvement in some of those films was very small and sometimes very big. So, no, that was a pretty good introduction.
Well, we're going to do 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life in a moment or two. But first, we're going to talk about a couple of your up-and-coming films. We've got Breaking Point and How to Date Billy Walsh. Before we go into any details about those, do you want to just give us a quick synopsis to what those two are about?
Yeah, so Breaking Point is about 2 brothers who've kind of drifted apart in life, if you like. But the one love they have is breakdancing. One brother is kind of following through on that. He's part of a breaking group, and the other brother's kind of drifted away. Mm-hmm. They have like an alteration in a nightclub. They have a breakdancing standoff, if you like. They get noticed by a scout, and then they're invited to try out for Team GB for the Breakdancing World Championships.
Oh, okay.
And it's a really sweet coming-of-age story. For breakdancing fans, it's probably the Rocky of breakdancing, if you like.
Okay.
Lots of international breakdancers.
What choice cuts have you got on there for the breakdancing fans?
Oh, do you know what? I don't think I can talk too much about that side of it yet, but I think everyone's going to be very happy.
Nice one. So what's How to Date Billy Walsh all about?
So How to Date Billy Walsh is a kind of romantic comedy set at a high school, which we shot in Yorkshire, the north of Yorkshire.
Okay.
And it's all about Billy Walsh, who comes over. He's an American part exchange student, the new kid, the cool kid on the block, and our kind of 2 leads, if you like, characters, Amelia and Archie. They've been friends for years. Archie's in love with Amelia. He's about to tell her. Amelia then sees Billy Walsh, and then she falls in love with him, and it's a whole world around it. So very sweet film.
Nice one. Well, look, let's stay focused on that one then. So for those that don't, for those that want to sort of know a little bit more about how films are made, so you as a producer, where does this film start getting your attention? At what point do you get involved with this?
So the production company is Future Artists Entertainment, and that's led by Matt Williams, who produced Last Train to Christmas.
Yeah.
He did Twist for Sky. It was something I believe he pitched to Amazon as an idea. Mm-hmm. Amazon loved the idea, and kind of from there, then script was developed. Then Matt obviously goes out to cast, etc., and gets people who he needs. My involvement really, so I did Last Train to Christmas with Matt Williams, where I'd never worked with him before. Matt Wilkinson, the other producer on that, who was the guy that I knew, if you like. We kind of worked on that together. We liked each other. Matt then said, I've got a breakdancing film. I need someone who can kind of handle the physical side of production, if you like. What do you think? And I looked at it and I really liked it. And that was kind of where I started. And it was a relatively quick one, really, in terms of turnaround. You know, some of these projects can take years to develop, and sometimes they don't come to fruition at all.
So it was a finished script then when you got involved. There was a draft. There was a draft that still needed work, but it was pretty much there. And then Alex Pillai, the director, came on board and he added his own flavor to it, and it was kind of set up, relatively quickly, cast kind of attached quickly. So it was a nice one. It was a nice one to do, and it was, they're never easy. I don't think any film is easy, and if it was easy, it probably wouldn't be worthwhile. And no, we'd bottle it and sell it, wouldn't we?
Yeah, of course. And we shot half of it in Yorkshire. We were at a big school up in Yorkshire, and then we shot the other half in Manchester. We did a little bit at the old Granada Studios in Manchester.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was great. And I weirdly I saw the final cut of it last week, and I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be excellent.
Were you on location in Yorkshire then?
Yes, we were at a school in Yorkshire, just north of York. We were there for 2 or 3 weeks, which comes with its logistical challenges in terms of there's not many crew there. There's certainly no equipment, so everything has to be brought up. Everyone has to be accommodated. But we kind of had full run at this school, and it was just a lot of fun. And then I think the last 3 weeks, then we went on location in Manchester. We did a few days at Granada Studios, which is now called Versa. And yeah, it was a really nice vibe, really nice cast, a young cast, all very enthusiastic and excited. We had Sebastian, Croft, and Charithra Chandran involved, and Tanner Buchanan, who plays Billy, from Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
And we had some really nice supporting cast, Lucy Punch, Nick Frost. So, it was a really exciting project. And
what out of interest then, what are the challenges there where you've got a predominantly young cast, but then you've got supporting cast who are kind of, I guess, for want of a better expression, are more celebrity than you. How do you balance sort of servicing the celebrity side of a film production with people who just need to be, for want of an expression, just know what to do?
I think, do you know what? I think, certainly, Tanner, he's got a pretty big profile from Cobra Kai and things. And, Sebastian's obviously done Heartstopper, and Charithra was in Alex Rider. So they were pros, they were young, but they were very professional. And, we got lucky. Everyone was really enthusiastic about the project. Everyone was excited to be involved in it. So it's not always the case, but on that project, it was just a case of, everyone just came together, and it was nice. It was a really nice project. And
for those, obviously, that's everybody listening and me who weren't on set. Do you want to tell us a story from a kind of like one of those kind of times when there was a challenge that got resolved, and it got resolved, and it was sort of a real sort of achievement from the
every day, really. Certainly, when I look after production, essentially, it's every day there's a challenge, but they're usually really silly things like, half of when you're on location and you've got, 120 crew, all staying close to site. It's kind of trying to treat them as well as you can and trying to keep them as comfortable as you can. And, we had one occasion where, we had this huge accommodation for crew, and, 4 a.m. in the morning, all the fire alarms go off. And, it's probably somebody having a cheeky smoke in their room out the window. And, you come down and you've got 120 people looking at you going, mate, we got to get up in 2 hours. And, I think most things are overcome by common sense, people being reasonable.
Yeah.
And everyone just realizing. I think if you work in film, or television, we're in a very privileged position. We kind of get looked after quite well. We kind of get paid quite well, and we're not saving lives as such. And I think as long as we all kind of understand that, then I think it's a much more enjoyable experience.
Can you tell us maybe a favorite day on set or a favorite moment on set for you that that warms the heart, as it were, when you think back on the production?
Do you know what? I think my favorite day, the director Alex, he liked to use a lot of grip. So what I say by that, we had a lot of jibs and techno cranes.
Okay.
And, we had one particular scene which plays at the beginning of the movie, which was quite an intricate kind of crane move, if you like, and we had very limited time to shoot it, as you do on these films. And it's kind of that moment where you see all the crane techs there, the grip, the DOP. Everyone's kind of very nervous. Can we get this in the time? And if we don't complete our day, it's not like we come back with a very expensive techno crane the next day.
Yeah.
We have to get it, and it kind of worked. In the first couple of takes, and that sense of kind of relief, first of all, I suppose, is the first thing you feel. But then it's kind of like proud that this very difficult and quite expensive thing, which relies on, absolute planning and precision works. And I think generally from, a technical perspective in regards to filmmaking, I think that there's something very gratifying about that when you put so much thought and process into something and it kind of works.
Just even when just with you saying 120 people on set, that's like a village.
Yeah, it is. It is. Certainly when you've got to, feed them and put them all up, and it's when you're shooting in London or Manchester, Liverpool, you kind of wrap, and they're no longer your responsibility until you see them at unit call the next day. But certain location work, they're kind of with you. They're like your children for 24 hours, really.
We've not got the dates yet for release for these two films, but I will put dates in the show at the time of recording, which is April 2023. I'll put links in the show notes to coincide with the release when we know that. But thank you for sharing that about the bits about making of How to Date Billy Walsh. But let us, without further ado, move into the main feature of the podcast, which is Neil Jones's 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Now, before we get into it, I want to explain the rules to you and to the people who may not be familiar with the format. You've given me 3 films, which obviously makes sense given the title of the show. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about those 3 films, but to make sure we don't talk about one more than the other, I have my alarm, which will sound like this. You can hear that at your end, okay, Neil?
Yeah, I've got it.
Beautiful. So that'll go off when 5 minutes have passed. So we're going to talk about each film for 5 minutes at a time. There's always a little bit of wriggle room at the end, but finish a sentence by all means. And to be honest with you, I'm usually the biggest rule breaker because maybe some of the things you've said, I want to ask you more. So, but it just helps us balance the show out. So at least give at least 5 minutes coverage to each film rather than 15 minutes on one and then just tell you the titles of the other 2. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
Perfect. Now, I'm going to ask this question because I made this assumption on a previous show that the order they were given to me wasn't the order to speak to them. So am I doing it in the order you've given me the 3 films? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Because the guest that I had on presumed I was going to do them in date of release order. And I'm like, well, I didn't know what stories are attached to each film. Nice. So I'm going to do these in the order you've given me. And without further ado, the first on your list is Oscar-winning 1976 Rocky.
Yes.
So where does that fit in the canon of Neil Jones watching films? How do you see this? How do you see it, first of all?
So I think the 3 films I've given you are not necessarily my favorite 3 films, but the exception to that is Rocky. I think it's probably my favorite film of all time. And I think I was trying to think earlier today when the first time I saw it was, and I think like 1 and 2 kind of merged together. But I'm pretty certain that it was probably at my grandfather's house when I was probably 4 or 5, very young.
Yeah.
I don't think I had a video at my parents' house at that time.
Yeah.
But my grandfather had a video, and there was loads of grandkids, so like we kind of take it in terms to who gets to go over and stay. And it would always be he'd go to a video shop called Aberdeen Video in Merthyr Tydfil, where I'm from.
Yeah.
And I liked the cover. It was a guy boxing. I thought that's pretty exciting. Merthyr is kind of known for its boxing with all its champions. And I just loved it. I just thought it was fantastic. It's interesting. The 1970s is definitely my favorite decade of filmmaking, and obviously it's the 1970s films could be quite bleak, and realism was kind of at the forefront. I think of a lot of those characters, and Rocky kind of has all of those attributes, which I love. Almost feels like a documentary at times. Dark, real characters, rough around the edges, but it kind of did something which hadn't been done in quite a while in kind of mainstream cinema, if you like, is that it kind of had a happy ending, which was quite rare for the. And even though he doesn't win at the end, and thank God he doesn't, because I don't think we'd have believed it, but he goes the distance, and I think there's something quite noble, and certainly for me, like the underdog kind of. Maybe not winning, but having a good shot. I think, I just really related to it. And, the cast in the film itself, like, just fantastic. Talia Shire, Stallone, Carl Weathers, everywhere. It's just perfect, in my opinion. And, I know I think everyone knows the story of Stallone trying to sell the script, and then unless he gave up the part, he didn't, and then they made it very low budget at the time. And I just think that low budget quality of the film really enhances it. It does feel like a documentary at times, and
because him playing the lead, given like the kind of almost like exploitation films that he would have got his own experience in up to that date.
Yeah,
they don't scream potential Oscar winner, do they?
No, and certainly he probably didn't scream leading man at all. And I know the inspiration. There was I think Muhammad Ali fought Chuck Webner in 1975, and Chuck Webner was a very similar Rocky character, if you like, a no-hoper, just wanted to kind of give a good account for himself, and he knocks Ali down, loses the fight, and I think Stallone watches that fight, being kind of frustrated with his own career, and then I think he just locks himself away, and probably with a pencil and a pad, because no one had IMAX then. And
no.
I just think it's remarkable, and there's so much about the film I love. Like, I'm a big boxing nut myself, and and everyone from my town is really, and every boy in my town at some point probably boxed. And I just think the boxing, like, it's over the top, but you feel like you're in the ring, which is nice.
What do you think it gets right then about boxing that maybe cinema doesn't always get right?
I think as the Rocky films kept getting made, obviously I think reality became
secondary,
more far away. Yeah. But that's fine, by the way. I've got a soft spot for all the sequels too.
Yeah.
But I think it does. I think it's that we see him in the gym. We see the opening scene is him in the small hall boxing.
Oh, it's grim, that, isn't it? That is a grim.
It is grim, and it's very true. It's there's events all up and down the country now, which small hall boxing, and it really is the lifeblood really of the sport. And I think it gets that really spot on. And there's a scene where Mickey, his trainer, says, you could have been something, but you kind of blew it. And I think that's very realistic. There's so many boxing gyms where there's very talented kids who, with the right attitude and maybe the right leadership and direction could probably go on and win titles. And, life gets in the way. And I think with the character of Rocky, I think life has got in the way, but look, I love it. I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, just to add that after that, just to give you that sense of the reality of being a sort of undercard boxer at the smallest kind of event, that first payment where him and the guys just butted him, and he's beaten him because he's got angry, which is obviously a good setup for where the film's going to go. And the promoter comes in with the money, and he goes, right, so it's 70. I can't remember the numbers exactly, but he just goes like $75, and then he goes $15 for the rent of the locker, $5 for this, and then he ends up giving him $40, and he's just he looks like he's been through the mill, and you're like, Jesus, for $40.
Yeah, he's got a split eye. He's probably broke both his hands. He probably can't work the next day. And that's very realistic, I think, for a lot of small hall fighters. But
and he says, come back in a fortnight.
Yeah. After your brain scan, come back. Yeah.
Right then, sir. Moving swiftly along, but going back 3 years in time, we're going to be looking at one of Al Pacino's. I guess is kind of where he gets noticed, I suppose, more than like as a movie star. We're talking about Serpico.
Yeah. So Serpico was the film he did directly after the first Godfather.
Okay.
And I think the same year he made a film called Scarecrow with Gene Hackman, which is also, very good.
Yeah.
Like Serpico. So a little story. From the age of 17 to 20, I worked in a factory in Merthyr. And I always loved films, but I was kind of, I was brought up in the 80s. So, I loved Indiana Jones, Star Wars, and, I watched the Van Damme films, etc., etc.
Yeah.
There was a lad that I worked with, Andrew Jones, and he was the first vegan I ever met.
Wow.
In Merthyr in this factory. And he was an interesting guy. And we just started talking about, films and videos we watched as such. And I said, I'm trying to get into Al Pacino, because I didn't really know Al Pacino as a kid, because he kind of took that hiatus, if you like, after the Revolution, when he didn't work for a few years. And I saw him as the bombastic version in Scent of a Woman and thought, wow, this guy's got a lot of energy. Then I saw The Godfather and I was like, well, where's Al Pacino? He's a totally different actor. He brought in Serpico on video for me to watch when I was about 17, and I took it home, and I'd never seen a film like it in terms of, I don't think a film has ever looked like New York like it does in that film. Like, it feels like you're there. It feels you see all the seediness. If you feel like you're, in the Bronx, that is definitely shot like a documentary. Obviously, Sidney Lumet, who directed, what a director he is, and this is basically like anecdote after anecdote, I believe, in that film, really, where it's all on Serpico. There's some supporting characters, but there's no real subplot outside of him. And I really felt like I was watching a documentary on this cop, and it was so realistic to me. I think it's the first time I watched a film and thought of cinema as can really tell very realistic stories. It doesn't have to be, the cop shoots the bad guy and wins. It's, it absolutely blew my mind. And I think it's probably Pacino's best performance by far. And that's a big thing to say, I know, but just...
You've done it, that 70s thing of like, the good guys aren't always wearing badges is...
Yeah. Well, the badges are the bad guys in it, except for Serpico. And I think that film, it maybe doesn't get the attention of like A Dog Day Afternoon, which is also fabulous. But I think Serpico is like the quintessential 1970s New York film, I think it's that and French Connection. They feel so real to me.
So what, from you at that point when you're in that faction and in Merthyr, and you obviously love in film by the very fact you have a conversation when I'm getting into Al Pacino, that's not the normal everyday chatter. So where does that send you in? How does that start to build in terms of you're thinking, hold on a minute, this is a world I want to be in?
I think at that stage, probably not. I think it was just more like a thirst for, to see more films like that. And, and I've always been a big reader as well. And I kind of, I think those ages of like 17 to 25, they kind of really shape, your taste in terms of cinema and literature and music, if you like. So no, I don't think I ever thought, wow, I want to go and kind of make this. It was more a case of give me more, and he'd bring a video in every week. The next week he'd bring in Bob Deerfield, and then it would be Dog Day Afternoon and Justice for All, Cruising. And I think in the space of like 7-8 weeks, Andrew Jones had basically given me Al Pacino's catalogue, and they're all recorded. They were videos he'd recorded off television, so.
Really?
Yeah. So, fast forward the adverts.
I worked in a picture framing warehouse in Ancoats at the back of Piccadilly train station in Manchester, and there was a woman there who used to tape stuff off probably Sky Movies, what would have been just one channel, and there was a roaring trade she had.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, selling them on the pub on a Friday night, eh?
So so Andrew Jones, you say his name was the guy he was giving you this film education, as it were. But
yes.
sort of, what was your conversation like with him? Do you remember anything about what you said about Serpico to him when you've gone home, watched it, and come back into work and gone, do you know what?
Do you know what? I'd probably go in very. He was quite a few years older than me, and I'd go back into work and be really excited, and probably one of the other lads would go, "Oh, I've seen this boring," and we'd get into a heated debate. But no, Andy would just go, "Well, next week I'll bring in Bobby Deerfield or whatever," and it was kind of like an education for me. Really, it was fabulous.
No, it sounds amazing. No, it sounds like a great colleague to find at work.
Yeah, definitely.
Right then, we're gonna jump into the 21st century for your final choice. Cameron Crowe's, I'm guessing it's a remake of Open Your Eyes, isn't it?
Yes,
Spanish. Is it Spanish or South?
Yes,
it's Spanish, not Chile. He's Spanish Chilean, isn't he? The guy that made the original. I'm talking about Cameron Crowe's then English language version, Vanilla Sky, starring Tom Cruise in his this is kind of his dark period, isn't it? Because like Collateral's not long after this, is it?
Yeah, I think Collateral's about 4 or 5 years later. But I think Cruise 90s and the early noughties, if you like, he made a lot of great kind of character-led dramas, and I think he does them very well. And so Vanilla Sky, leading back to what you asked me earlier about, did Serpico ever, influence you to want to be a filmmaker?
Yeah.
So Vanilla Sky. So Cameron Crowe had like a 3-film run from 96, I believe, Jerry Maguire. Then Almost Famous in 2000, maybe 2001.
Saw it the Genesis in Mile End. It sort of broke my heart as an aspiring music journalist at the time.
Yeah, fabulous film. And then he did Vanilla Sky. Now, I think probably Vanilla Sky isn't as good as Jerry Maguire and Almost Famous, but I was living in America at the time, and I was kind of in a college thing there, and it was my first Christmas away from home.
Right.
I was a proper homebody. Before I moved to America, I'd never been abroad, and I was staying at a friend's house in St. Louis, Missouri, and we didn't really have anything to do for Christmas, so I think it was Christmas Eve. We went to the cinema, and I don't think I'd even seen a trailer for it, if I'm honest. And it was showing. It's a Tom Cruise film. It's probably going to be quite entertaining. And the film absolutely blew my mind. I'd never seen the original at the time, knew nothing about it. And I think that, like, the first kind of 10 minutes of the film, you've got, Radiohead kicks in for the alarm clock. It's just fabulous. And then you've got him running down Times Square and it's empty. And then it just takes you on this real kind of visceral dream, if you like. And it absolutely blew my mind. And I think the last act maybe is a little on the nose and, a little hammy. But I just thought it was fabulous. I think it deals a lot of things. I think it deals a lot with, the future, the worry of the future, your kind of vanity.
Yeah. Your own mortality.
Yeah. Rejection, certainly with the Cameron Diaz character.
Yeah.
We've all been rejected in our life and have some empathy there. And the soundtrack, it absolutely blew my mind. And, it's probably not in my top 20, maybe not even my top 50 films, but it had such an impact on me. And I remember coming out of that cinema and, I just moved to the States at the time, and I'd been in Merthyr all my life. And I thought, okay, I'm out of Merthyr now. This is the next journey of my, the next impact in my life.
Yeah.
But while I was there, I didn't quite know what I was doing. And I was kind of looking for that next thing. And that really made me think. And it inspired me to write. And I wrote some short stories as a kid, but it made me want to write a script. And I wrote lots of scripts, and probably some of them I dread to read again, but it really had an impact on me. And I think it was there's so many tones and so many kind of streams you can follow in that film. And I was coming on the train back from London yesterday. I live in Lancashire now. And I watched Vanilla Sky because I hadn't watched it for a few years, and I knew we were talking about it. And even now it holds up so well, and I think it could be Cruise's best film, I think, as an actor. He's really great in it.
Well, he has a lot. I mean, it's kind of, he's got the range, hasn't he, with what happens to the character to be able to do a lot. In many, Born on the 4th of July, he has to go to the pit of his stomach in some senses with what he has to do in that film. But it is, you are starting with the man who's coming out of that confusion, whereas this is about somebody having what appears to be either a nervous breakdown or an existential crisis, one or the other, but you can't see it. So he's having to portray something that makes us understand it, isn't he, in the way that he... I mean, I don't know about you, but I thought rewatching it before speaking to you, that opening bit, I mean, they say that, when you go to sort of writing classes and don't start your film with waking up, and going to work. Don't start there. I've never seen such a brilliant subversion of that trope as ending up in a peopleless Times Square,
Yeah.
Because everything, I mean, but actually just knowing what's going to happen, and you get that. What happens is that I'm guessing it's a helicopter shot, not a drone shot in that time period.
Yeah, probably.
The way they've edited it kind of judders. So knowing it's a dream as opposed to reality.
Yeah,
but actually not knowing it, that's a really clever way.
Yeah, there's lots of things in it as well when you rewatch, like when he's running down the Times Square. If you look very closely, you can see a reflection of people watching.
Oh,
and I can't remember where I read it. I might have heard it on a podcast actually, where Cameron Crowe said that we saw it in the edit. We were like, oh, it wasn't intentional shit. But then he was like, you know what? Let's keep it because it adds to his paranoia and it adds to that. Is this a dream? Is it not a dream? Is someone watching his dreams? Is obviously how it turns out.
Friedkin says if the audience are worried about a reflection, he was asked this question about one of his films,
Right.
And he said, if an audience is worried about the reflection of somebody that's not in shot, then I'm doing the film wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think he's probably right. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. And then you've got the lovely. I mean, if you know the Dylan album cover, you feel clever for spotting it, but then obviously because you think it's just clever filmmaking, Cameron Crowe music and all that, but then for it to actually have a payoff in terms of it, you're not that clever at all. It's actually the mind of a man going mad.
Yeah. Well, I think Cameron Crowe always gives us payoffs, though. I think that.
Yeah,
he's not. I don't think he's the most subtle filmmaker, by the way, and I think that's absolutely fine. And I quite like that about him. And yeah, he does. And I love that they shot it autumn or the winter, if you like, because everything just looks like magic hour. It's golden, it's beautiful, and it's just it's a really great film. And I think if you can make a film in New York, which is probably an incredibly expensive thing to do. I think that if you can nail New York, then I think there's something automatically. It's probably the most cinematic city in the world, in my opinion.
I was going to say, now looking at it with your producer's head on, can you even manage to budget the cost of shutting down Times Square for a shot?
Yeah, do you know what? I have no idea, but I imagine it was seven figures at the time.
I think so. I think you're right.
And I think why not? If you can do it, if you got the resources, then go for it. And it's interesting on Vanilla Sky because I think people either love it or hate it. There's no middle ground with it. And I think some people maybe saw it as a bit of a kind of vanity exercise for Cruise, but I think it's so much more than that. And I think...
Well, there's more obvious choices in films to pick, isn't it? If you're going to be if it's a vain thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think like the character David that he plays, I think why it's so relatable is because for the first 45 minutes of the film, this is basically Tom Cruise's life, right? That he's incredibly successful, incredibly charismatic, incredibly good looking, can have pretty much anything he wants. So we go on that journey pretty easy with him. And then when it all kind of goes wrong for him, firstly with the disfigurement and losing, the girl he's in love with, you go, okay, how are you going to deal with this now, Tom Cruise? And he does it remarkably. It's in
a way it can, and this is where it's sort of, I mean, it's, I guess if at a big level, it's there's a sci-fi element to this because of the elements of what the future might bring us in terms of how we think about how we look, how we age and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in some senses, it's like once he starts not being able to see what he can see or isn't sure what he's seeing, when Penelope Cruz and Cameron Diaz are kind of flipping in and out of what he thinks is reality, then in a way it's borderline like horror, like Jacob's Ladder is horror.
Yeah. I definitely agree. And I read somewhere that, and I thought this was an interesting kind of thought, is that Vanilla Sky is if Steven Spielberg did Cameron Crowe. Do you know what I mean? I think
that's not a bad description.
It does have that kind of like sci-fi element. And you are right, it does get dark. And weirdly, when I rewatched it the other day, that scene in particular with Diaz and Penelope Cruz kind of flipping, even that kind of, I don't know why, but it kind of had a bit of Chinatown about it.
Yeah.
Kind of like, what is going on? It disturbs you what's happening, and you kind of know what's coming, but you're kind of willing him not to do it because you feel for him. And Cameron Diaz also, I think she's brilliant in it, and Cameron Diaz in a film where she keeps getting rejected, like that in itself is remarkable. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I tell you, thinking of that Spielberg comment, there was like there's the first time you see the car crash going off through the railings and nosediving into the road below.
Yeah,
there's a really beautiful attention to detail which I don't think I'd ever spotted before. But again, rewatching it with the conversation in mind, I'm trying to think, well, what else am I seeing? Like, and I don't know if you can remember, but the camera holds on that moment, like it doesn't go anywhere. It's the frame, it's the classic mise en scène where nothing is moving apart from the steam rising off a crashed car as you take in shit as he just died.
Yeah, and
then in the background, three silhouettes just start. Who obviously, the public, as it were, have spotted the crash, which is all part of
running towards it,
and then it cuts before they get anywhere near. Yeah. But I just thought that was a wonderful attention to detail in terms of making the audience believe, that this is really happening. This has happened, or or whatever else. It gave it an authority, I think, that just the car on its own wouldn't have achieved, I think, maybe.
And I agree. I'm weirdly, I noticed it when I watched it on the train yesterday as well. So the third AD did their job that day.
They did indeed. Well, look, we've got to the end of your 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. I will, for the films we previewed at the beginning, I will put links in the show notes and information about their release to help people find them so they can watch them. And it just gives me to say thank you very much for giving us your time on the Britflicks podcast.
Thank you, mate. And I've got a question for you, by the way. What are your 3?
Oh, you see, you've asked me on air, haven't you? You're the first person to do that. Mine are Smokey and the Bandit, Time Bandits, and Friday the 13th.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
Again, like you, they're not necessarily... I mean, Time Bandits is my all-time favourite film.
Right.
But if I hear we've got a long way to go and a short time to get there, the opening guitar, diddling of that, I'm stopping everything to watch Smokey and the Bandit.
Right.
And the fact they use the song about 5 times all the way through is all the better for me.
Yeah.
And Friday the 13th is arguably where I became a horror fan, I think. I mean, I remember having nightmares because my babysitter allowed us as a kid to stay up and watch the Hammer House of Horror. So officially that would be the first one. But we had a bootleg VHS of Friday the 13th in the house. You know, my dad must have got it off a mate at work or something like that, you know. And I watched it like an idiot, age 10. And I think, the Jason scene at the end.
Yeah.
That was the bit. The supernatural element, the killing bit was obviously was visceral.
Yeah.
But that's just frightening. But the idea that there was some creature that was just that was dead that wasn't dead, I think that completely flummoxed me. 10, was it 10, maybe 11?
Right.
Still, obviously, no age for watching that film. And Time Bandits was a whatchamacallit? It was a Channel 4, recorded off Channel 4. And I'm safe to say, I think I've watched it over 100 times, I think, and it's just the perfect film for me.
I haven't seen Time Bandits in a long time, so I'm going to revisit it now. So.
Well, Arrow have got a lovely 2K Blu-ray restoration of it.
Oh, okay.
And when they did that release a few years back, so I say few because I'm sort of forgetting COVID, but it's pre-COVID, so that's ignoring the 2 years of COVID, as it were. And Prince Charles showed it on the big screen. So that was the first time in all the times I'd ever seen it, I finally got to see it on the big screen. And I still spotted something I'd never seen before, which I was just, because obviously the big screen does something to film that, as much as if we'd be lying if we say all our best films we've seen them on. You were talking about the VHSs record off the telly. I mean, I've watched so many films in the wrong bloody aspect and black and white when the colour and whatever. You just watched what you watched in the 80s and you watched it on what you were given. We're blessed in this age now, aren't they, where you can buy, you can get HD bloody projectors for under $1,000 now, can't you? And you can have it almost a cinema set up in your house. But yeah, so watching Time Bandits adverts and all off Channel 4 is I just over and over. That was just, I don't think that I can't think of a more perfect film. And obviously, and also for what was supposed to be aimed at kids, is such a bleak ending.
Yeah, yeah.
His parents die. I mean, that's and you get and the knowing part of the film is Sean Connery's one of the fire officers. You're like, that's amazing. Yeah. So the guy he was most pally with during this mad journey through time turns out to be. So just to say, the bit I spotted that I'd never seen before in the first camera pan of Kevin's bedroom, I'd never noticed the short Napoleon test your height kind of thing on a kid's bedroom wall.
Right.
Which obviously the short Napoleon sequence is born out of that part of his memory.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, I haven't seen it for a while, but I'll definitely revisit it.
No, it's perfect. So thank you for asking. I welcome that invite, and now you've done it, no one else can.
Yeah.
So I will repeat the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for giving us your time on the Britflicks podcast.
Thanks, mate. I enjoyed it. Thanks very much.